There comes a moment in life when something silently breaks. It's not a scream, not an event, it's a falling of veils. Suddenly, what once seemed solid begins to dissolve. Certainties, narratives, the roles we wore without noticing. The world doesn't change its shape, but it changes its texture. The light falls differently. The sound of the wind seems slower. The gaze of others carries a distance that wasn't there before. And in that instant, something within you knows, even without words, that a cycle has ended. What dies is not the world, but the way you once saw it. It is the beginning of the unveiling, the moment when consciousness, weary of hiding behind characters, begins to awaken. And awakening, contrary to what people say, is not a glorious ascension. It is an undressing. It is the loss of everything that is not true. Awakening adds nothing, it removes. It strips away the layers of illusion until only the essential remains, the bare self, without ornaments, without justifications, without masks. This process, though it may seem divine, is deeply human, because the veil that falls is not the world's, it's the self's. It is the collapse of the idea of who we thought we were supposed to be. And with that collapse comes silence, a silence that is not the absence of sound, but the absence of falseness. It's as if all of life up to now had been an agitated dream, and now, for the first time, you awaken among the ruins of your own theater. At first, this silence hurts. It hurts because everything that held your identity together begins to lose meaning. Passions, goals, even love itself, seem to change their nature. You look at people, at the bonds that once moved you, and you feel something strange, a greater love, but a lesser need. As if to love were no longer the same as to want. As if true love began precisely where the desire to possess ends. This is the first mystery of the falling veil. When illusion dissolves, love doesn't disappear, it transforms. It becomes quieter, vaster, more impersonal. Not the love that seeks a we, but the love that recognizes the whole in everything. A love that is not expressed through vows, but through presence. That doesn't wish to grasp, but to contemplate. And at that point many feel the paradox. The heart has never loved so deeply, and yet never needed so little. But the ego doesn't understand this purity. It misses the drama, the intensity, the promises that once gave life meaning. It despairs before the love that does not ask, because this love does not negotiate, does not make contracts, does not offer guarantees. It simply is. And the ego fears what simply is. It wants direction, control, a happy ending. But awakened love is not a path, it is a space. It is not a search, it is a state. And living in that state is like walking on invisible ground. There is no map, only trust. With the veil, the illusions of forever also fall away. Forever is the invention of those who cannot bear the flow. Life, like love, is made of waves approaching, retreating, revealing, quieting. The awakened one learns to love as the sea loves the shore, knowing that each touch may be the last, yet every return is inevitable. There is no fear in impermanence, there is reverence, because what changes is the proof that it is alive. And in that reverence, humility is born. Love, stripped of romance, becomes contemplation. You begin to love what is, without wishing it to be different. You love the tired gaze, the unspoken word, the absence that teaches. You love the silence between sentences, the pause between gestures, the interval between two hearts. You love not what completes, but what reveals. And it is in that formless love that the mystery begins to shine. Most people call it loneliness, but it is something deeper communion with the real. It is realizing that there was never separation, that the other has always been an extension of the same being that you are. When the veil falls, love ceases to be a bridge and becomes the river itself. There is no longer a from or a to, only flow. And flow needs no destination, it is complete in itself. The love that remains after the veil is quiet, because it has nothing to prove. It doesn't justify, display, or demand witnesses. It simply vibrates in everything, in the smile given without reason, in the gesture that seeks no return, in the compassion that arises without effort. This is the love that does not depend on another to exist, the love that is. And at that point, something within you dissolves for the last time, the belief that love needs a story. You understand that love is not a narrative, but a state of being. It has no beginning or end, needs no name or promise. It is the love that remains when everything false has fallen away. And the most beautiful thing is that it asks for nothing. It doesn't want to heal or save or transform. It simply recognizes what is already whole. The veil falls and love remains. Because love is the very space that holds everything that falls. With time, the silence that once seemed empty begins to reveal itself as full. What once appeared as absence transforms into pure presence. It is as if, with the falling of the veil, the world has been returned to its original nakedness, simple, vast, transparent. Nothing is lost, yet everything has changed in meaning. Life continues, but now it breathes through a different consciousness, and in that breathing, silent love begins to bloom like a calm, steady flame that no longer needs spectacle to exist. You begin to realize that true love was never what the mind imagined. It is not the meeting of two destinies, nor the fusion of two souls. It is the recognition that there is only one life expressing itself through countless forms. Love ceases to be a relationship and becomes a state of perception, the clear seeing that everything that touches your heart is, in some way, the same being, contemplating itself through different masks. At this point, love is no longer emotion, it is lucidity. It sees with tenderness, yet with detachment. It embraces, yet does not cling. It welcomes, yet does not possess. The love that remains after the veil knows that every attempt to hold on is an act of fear, and fear is the only barrier between you and what is real. So it lets things flow, not out of indifference, but out of trust, the trust that nothing true can be lost, and nothing false can be kept. That trust changes everything. You begin to move through the world with a lightness that once seemed impossible. People come and go, bonds form and dissolve, and yet something within you remains serene. Not because you've become cold, but because you've learned that love doesn't depend on the presence of another. It depends on the clarity of seeing the other as part of the same whole. Love ceases to be a fragile feeling and becomes the very structure of awakened consciousness. And the deeper you dive into this perception, the more you see that love is not a choice. It happens naturally, like the sun that warms without asking who deserves its heat. It needs no reason, no reciprocity. It is the spontaneous reflection of understanding that all life is one. This love does not need to justify itself, because it is the very essence of existence. But to live this way is total surrender, because free love, the love that remains, demands detachment from everything personal. It asks you to let die the need to be loved in the way the ego desires. It asks you to bow before impermanence and accept that nothing belongs to you. It asks you to love even without being loved in return, to bless even those who leave, to see beauty even in what falls apart. This is the kind of love the world does not understand, because the world has been taught to love out of fear. Most people call love the effort to hold on to what they are afraid to lose. But real love knows no prison. It is far too vast to fit inside promises. It is like the wind, it can only be felt as it moves. Try to grasp it, and it dies. It takes courage to love this way, the courage to watch everything pass and still go on loving. The courage to open your heart, knowing that time will take everything, including you. And paradoxically, this surrender does not bring loss but freedom, because when you accept impermanence, love ceases to be a threat and becomes grace. It no longer comes as hope, but as revelation. It doesn't say, "Stay with me," but "Stay true." It doesn't ask for loyalty to another, but for loyalty to presence itself. It is a love that lives in silence, yet sustains universes. With the veil already fallen, love becomes the natural mode of existence. You begin to notice that even the smallest things, a gesture, a glance, a breath, are expressions of this same love. It manifests in the moment you stop resisting what is. It lives in every act of acceptance, every forgiveness, every instant of lucidity, when the mind grows still and being simply is. And slowly, you understand, love never left. What left was the illusion that it needed a form. What dissolved were the outlines. Love remains because it never depended on what passes. It is the space in which everything happens, and that space cannot die. The veil falls, and what remains is love in its purest form. The love that knows no beginning and no end, that needs no words, because it already is. When the heart rests in this state, the world becomes transparent. You see pain and beauty coexisting, birth and death intertwined, and you realize that everything is part of the same dance. Love does not try to separate or fix, it observes, understands, and embraces. It is the silent, yes, life gives to itself in every moment. And then love begins to expand beyond everything you ever thought you were capable of loving. It flows past the human, the personal, the limited. It loves what lives and what dies. It loves what blooms and what decays. It loves what understands and what resists. It loves everything, because everything is a reflection of the same mystery. This is the love that remains when the veil no longer exists. And it is within this love that consciousness finally finds rest, because it does not ask, promise, or wait. It simply is. The love born from truth needs no storyline, it lives in the instant when being recognizes being. It is the gaze that does not judge, the presence that does not demand, the touch that does not hold. It is life loving itself in silence. With time, presence becomes the very center of existence. There is no longer a someone trying to love or to understand, there is only love happening silently through all that is. What once was effort is now flow. What once was search is now rest. You no longer practice love, you breathe it. It is in every gesture, every pause, every instant in which consciousness rests upon the world without asking for anything in return. It is at this point that love reveals its subtlest face, the face of unity. Separation dissolves, not as an idea, but as a direct experience. You begin to perceive that everything you see, everything you touch, everything you feel, is love itself expressing through infinite forms. Every gaze is love recognizing itself. Every encounter is love conversing with itself. Every loss is love changing shape to remind you that nothing ever truly leaves. This love cannot be taught, only recognized. It has always been here, but it was veiled by the stories we told ourselves about what love was supposed to be. When those stories exhaust themselves, love emerges as what it has always been, the very substance of consciousness. It is the invisible fabric that unites heaven and earth, being and nothingness, pain and joy. Everything that exists is a single vibration, a single movement, a single breath, love breathing through itself. In this state, even suffering gains new light. You begin to see it as part of a purification process. Every pain that arrives comes to break another piece of the old veil, to open more space within you. And as space expands, love spreads. It is no longer a feeling, it is a force that moves through you, a firm gentleness, without sentimentality, without attachment, without fear. It is the quiet courage to remain open in a world that insists on closing itself. To love then becomes an act of absolute presence. To love is to see without wanting to change. It is to be without trying to hold. It is to allow life to be what it is, without imposing conditions. This love is not resignation, but trust, the silent faith that everything unfolds with wisdom, even when the ego cannot understand. It is the recognition that the flow of life is wiser than any plan. And in that trust, love expands beyond the human, it becomes cosmic. You begin to perceive love even in what the world calls absence. Silence becomes sweet, solitude transforms into communion. The end of something becomes merely the beginning of another form of presence. Nothing seems opposed anymore, because everything reveals itself as complementary. Duality dissolves in the invisible embrace of the love that contains all things. And in this state, a new serenity is born. The awakened heart no longer struggles to understand or to be understood. It simply observes, vibrates, blesses. There is no longer urgency to teach, to heal, or to change the world. because the awakened one understands that the world heals itself when love is seen clearly. The simple act of being fully present is the greatest expression of love that exists. This love needs no witnesses. It blooms in silence, in small gestures, in the way you breathe, in the way you touch things, in the way you look at the sky before sleeping. It is invisible, yet perceivable to those who have also learned to see, because awakened love does not shout, does not convince, does not compete. It simply is. And in being, it becomes indestructible. When the veil has completely fallen, you realize that love was never something that comes or goes. It is the space where everything comes and goes. It is the unchanging backdrop upon which life paints its infinite forms. It doesn't begin with meeting, nor end with parting. It is the very canvas upon which all encounters and separations unfold. It is the same love that ignites the sun and moves the oceans, the same love breathing in you now. The awakened being looks at the world and sees no enemies, only different expressions of the same mystery. Even error becomes part of perfection. Even shadow is seen as a face of light. True love is inclusive. It does not choose what to love. It embraces everything, even what frightens it. It knows that there can only be wholeness where there is totality, and that the divine reveals itself as much in the flower as in the stone, as much in birth as in death. And little by little, love becomes silence, not because there is nothing left to say, but because everything has already been said in the simple act of existing. You realize that love does not need to be named. It is not in the words, but in the space between them. It is in the gaze that does not judge, the touch that does not hold, the presence that does not demand. It is in the moment when the ego falls silent and being remembers itself. At this point, the veil no longer exists. Everything that once stood between you and reality has dissolved. Love, then, is no longer something you feel, it is something you are. You are love breathing, love walking, love seeing its own reflection in everything. The world ceases to be a stage and becomes a mirror. Every sound, every color, every breath is a reminder of what you have always been. And yet, there is humility in this. For awakened love does not boast of its own light. It does not say, I love, it simply loves. It does not seek to be special, because it knows that love is the most ordinary of all miracles. It exists in everything, sustaining the universe without asking for recognition. And it is in that anonymity that love finds its final purity, the freedom to exist without needing to be noticed. Then, one day, you look at the world with new eyes, the same world, the same people, the same noises, but now everything seems forgiven. You see that nothing was ever truly wrong, not the pain, not the loss, not the illusion. Everything was part of the unveiling. Love did not arrive after the fall of the veil. It had always been there, hidden behind everything that kept it from being seen. Now, there is nothing left to seek. Love is not a goal, it is the ground. It is what remains when the veil falls. It is what continues even when all else fades away. It is the space between two gazes, the breath between two words, the pause between two hearts. It is the mystery that remains when every question has ceased. And here, silence becomes sacred. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of fullness, a silence that does not weigh, but sustains, that does not isolate, but embraces, that does not end, because it never began. It is the same silence that existed before the first sound, the same that will remain after the last, and within it, love endures vast, formless, nameless. You finally understand that there was never a real fall. The veil that drops is only the final act of the dream, and what remains after everything has gone is what has always been, pure presence, untouchable, eternal, love.